reflection of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program should not be viewed as a substitute for personal consultation with an attorney. Welcome to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. Jeff will be discussing a variety of legal topics with experts in the field. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, let's talk legal with Jeff Van Treese.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Talk Legal. I'm your host, Jeff Van Treese. I'm an attorney with the law firm Oltman, Flynn & Kubler, where we practice intellectual property law, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. You can check us out online and see all episodes of this show on our website at oltmanpatent.com. That's oltmanpatent.com. A very special guest this evening. He's joining us over the phone. His name is Bradford Cohen. Bradford is a trial lawyer. He practices criminal defense and immigration law down in Fort Lauderdale. He was a contestant on the hit show The Apprentice back in 2004, and he's joined us this evening to discuss some of the legal issues that have come up with the proposals coming from the Donald Trump campaign. I'm very interested to get his thoughts. So, Bradford, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. So I want to get right into it. The recent issue that's come up with Trump's proposal regarding immigration is to essentially do away with what's referred to as birthright citizenship. In other words, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, as it had been interpreted for many years, is that if somebody is born in the United States, within the geographic borders of the United States, they are automatically citizens, irrespective of the circumstances under which they were born here, if their parents were illegal aliens. And I'd just like to read the exact wording of the 14th Amendment in question. It says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So the issue of being born here, it says born or naturalized. So if you're born here, that should be enough. If you're subject to the jurisdiction of the state that you're born in, which everyone would be, that should be enough. That's why this has become very controversial, with Trump coming out and saying that he is essentially going to do away with birthright citizenship. You know, you practice immigration law. You know Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's kind of interesting because the original case, I of course am speaking from memory, but the original case that interpreted the 14th Amendment to establish citizenship for children of individuals was involving children of parents that were legally in the country, meaning they had paperwork to legally be here, be it for a visa, a temporary visa, or anything above. What it evolved into was essentially saying that individuals, even if they're here illegal, that the illegal aliens could then have a child on American soil, and that child would be then automatically being an American. I don't believe there's been a case before the Supreme Court that has specifically addressed the issue of children of illegal aliens. It's an interesting issue. It really is, and a lot of people are saying that what he is proposing would be impossible to achieve, and I don't believe it would be impossible to achieve. Obviously, there's going to be some hurdles in the way in terms of interpretation of the law, interpretation of the 14th Amendment. But, you know, that's what the law is about, and you as a lawyer know that as well, is that everything that we do is kind of a living, breathing document. And when I say that, I mean things change, you know, perpetually. You know, 50 years ago, we didn't have the Internet. We didn't have certain laws that revolved around issues that become issues because of technology or because of things changing as we go along. A lot of people that are against the Second Amendment say, yeah, you know, back then everyone had a rifle in their home, and that's kind of what they anticipated. And nowadays, they're using this same Second Amendment to say, we should have 50 round magazines for rifles, and we have a right to that. And it's very interesting the way that people interpret different things and the way they come up with these arguments. Obviously, like I said, Mr. Trump is interpreting it in a way that would allow him as president to limit the availability of a child for illegal immigrants to become a U.S. citizen. So, like I said, it's an interesting issue. Do I know whether or not it would fly? No, because then I'd have a crystal ball, and I'd probably play the lottery tomorrow. So, it's definitely an interesting legal issue, and I think that it's up for interpretation. These people that say there's nothing that can be done because it's the 14th Amendment, I think don't know truly what they're talking about, because he's talking about, I believe, he's talking about the interpretation of the 14th Amendment, as opposed to, getting rid of the 14th Amendment, which would be a whole different situation.
That's interesting, Bradford, because the 14th Amendment actually does have some vague language within it, but I really, you have to go with the clear meaning first, and then after that, if there's something ambiguous, then you can bring in the context argument, like you were talking about changing technology and so forth. So, for example, the 14th Amendment also says that you have a right to life, liberty, and property, and that term liberty is very vague. What liberty do we have? And then when you take into account privacy rights in the digital age, something that certainly the founders of the Constitution would not have been considering back in 1791 when the Bill of Rights was first adopted. But you have to apply the clear meaning first. In other words, if the language is clear, that's what you have to go with, and unless there's something else that would indicate otherwise. And
right.
Here it says, that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. That's pretty clear. So even though we have a very different world today,
sure,
especially with respect to border security and immigration and so forth, you fall back on the fact, you say, well, it's still clear. The language is still clear, and if the language is clear, you got to go with that. You can't change what the meaning is when the meaning is clear.
Yeah, I understand. Listen, like I said, I think what it's going to take is someone to challenge that language. Do I agree that the language in itself is clear and that a child born in the United States should be a U.S. citizen? But the problem that you have is you start to read into the interpretation. Did the forefathers mean people that were here legally, non-legally? Like back then, there was no legal and illegal because everyone was coming to America. If you look at when the document was originally created, right? So the document was created hundreds of years ago in terms of individuals that were born in America. Well, the issue becomes, we didn't have these problems with the borders. We didn't have quote-unquote illegal aliens. People were coming to America because they were flooding into America because America was an open country. We wanted people to come to America. We wanted to populate America. So do I believe times have changed? Yes, I believe times have changed, and it's going to take someone to address that issue in terms of appealing a decision in order to address whether or not the plain language is still the plain language of the amendment. Now, what's interesting is, I believe in 1982, don't quote me, but I believe in 1982, it was definitely in the early 80s, there was a footnote in a decision where the Supreme Court, I think, said that there wasn't any distinction that could be drawn between people who entered legally and people that entered illegally. So, is there
the language says all persons, and so the question is the word persons ambiguous? Does persons only mean people that are here legally or illegally?
Right.
And that's kind of hard to come up with any other conclusion that a person that's born is a human being.
You're right, and the problem that we have is, like I said, the problem that you have is this document was written in a time where you didn't really have to worry about illegal aliens, and you didn't have to worry about individuals coming to the country to, purposefully coming to the country just to have a child here so that child would be a U.S. citizen. You didn't have the same issues. And that's why we always say it's a living, breathing document. I would never rule anything out in regards to whether or not the Supreme Court goes one way or the other. You have a couple justices on the Supreme Court that I would think are getting towards retirement, and you don't know how it changes. We don't know how it changes. We don't know who the next president's going to be and who they're going to appoint, but I would imagine the next president, if they get 2 terms, I think is going to be appointing at least 1 and maybe 2 Supreme Court justices because of the age of some of the Supreme Court justices, that's going on right now. And does that change the makeup of the court? It might, depending on who becomes president. And then again, it might also change the decision, it was a footnote back in the 80s on whether or not, these things are applicable to people that are here illegally. And whether or not it was anticipated. I don't think it was anticipated by the 14th Amendment that individuals would be here, quote unquote, illegally to have children. So it's an interesting issue. I think there's a lot of things that are revolving around it in terms of whether or not he'll get any traction on it. He's Donald Trump. Like, he gets traction on everything.
He does.
He's like nature.
Right.
When they say nature always finds a way, that's the same thing with Mr. Trump. He always finds a way.
He is certainly an irresistible force, and I think it's quite. We're really sort of watching history here for the first time. There's never been a candidate like him before that's self-funded, that has this level of independence. It really is fascinating, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But before we leave the illegal immigration topic, it's going to be another interesting thing to see what he does with respect to retroactivity, which is the people that were born here, that were granted citizenship. Is he going to take that away from them with respect to saying that if their parents were illegal and they were born here or became citizens, is it now going to be taken away? He hasn't really been clear on that issue.
Acting retroactively, you're saying?
Exactly, right.
Yeah, I think that any law that would or would not interpret the 14th Amendment differently, I don't think would be applied retroactively. Again, it would have to be determined on the way that law would change and how they would, if it was an interpretation of the law, if it was an act of the president, if there was something else that was going to intervene. I think that would be kind of the moving factor as to whether or not it would be retroactive. And there's you've seen laws before that have not been retroactive, where they've made for example, if someone was charged with possession of marijuana and then all of a sudden they made marijuana legal, it doesn't retroactively say at the time that it happened that person was still breaking the law at the time that it happened. So I don't know if it would be retroactive. The moving factor would have to be looked at in terms of how they would proceed in court and how it was changed, either an interpretation of the 14th Amendment, an act of the president, or any of the above, in order to see how that would be affected retroactively. But I don't think that any way you slice it, I don't think it would be affected retroactively.
It's just hard to imagine somebody that was born in the United States, that enjoyed all of the privileges and immunities of being a citizen, is now going to have their citizenship stripped when they're in their 20s and then deported when they were born here. I mean, that's just hard to fathom that would ever happen.
No, I don't think it would. And listen, I've had people on the other end of that, where people came over here where they were 10 or 11 months old. They weren't born in America, but they were 10 or 11 months old, and they never became citizens, but they lived here till they were 40, 45 years old, and all of a sudden something comes up. They get in trouble with the law, or someone says, hey, he's not a citizen, and then they start investigating, and they want to deport them back to their original country where they know no one. I had someone who got in trouble probably last year, and we're still fighting the deportation, where they want to deport him back to, Italy, and he's been to Italy maybe twice in his life, and, he came here when he was 10 months old. So, immigration in itself is a very tricky situation in terms of what's fair. You always want, and law and courtrooms. You know this because you're an attorney as well. they hate the word "what's fair." I don't know why, but like sometimes when you're arguing a point and you just say like, you understand what the law is, you understand what the punishment is, or you understand what the result of the law is, but is it fair? Like, is it just fair? And isn't that what the forefathers wanted? Didn't they want a system that was fair? So, when you have someone that's been here for 45 years and is contributing to America, who is paying taxes, who is doing all these things, is it fair to throw that person out? And then you have all these people that are not contributing, that are not good people, and that are kind of getting away with just being here. And I think that's what Mr. Trump wants to address, is the bad people. Do sometimes good people get swept up in that? Yes. Sometimes good people do get swept up in that, and I'm sure they are trying to figure out a way to separate the two, and it might be impossible to separate it completely. But I think his intent is that America contributes to Americans and makes sure that we are taken care of at home before we are taking care of other people from abroad.
It is interesting because he thinks that he says that his plan should still work, or he thinks it will work even if the 14th Amendment is interpreted as granting birthright citizenship, because if the parents are deported, then they're going to take their children with him. That's what he essentially said in an interview to Chris Cuomo recently. So that would bring up a whole nother can of worms in the event that you have parents that don't take their children out back home with them when they're deported, and then the child is left in foster care. And again, if the child's a citizen, then they would have to be provided for. The frequency with which that would happen is totally unknown, and it would just be a whole public policy debate that would erupt over that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And listen, this is not This is not something that is brand new. This is not something that is a new subject. Certainly, individuals that are running for office like to sweep certain things under the rug and not talk about them. And people that are against Mr. Trump, they even have to admit that he opened up the lines of dialogue. I mean, he didn't invent this argument. The argument's been around for a while. I think there was a Birthright Citizen Act back in, 2005 or 2006, somewhere around there, where Congress wanted to limit, birthright citizenship. So there was definitely this is nothing new, to the system. But now everyone's kind of taking a look at it because Trump's talking about it, and it's very funny when you see Mr. Trump speak. All the other candidates all of a sudden start taking up the same cause as Mr. Trump, and he used the term anchor babies and got kind of shelled for it for about a minute. And then he said, listen, that's the term I'm going to use. And then Jeb Bush used the term, and he just got destroyed. And, it comes to the point where people admire Mr. Trump for not sugarcoating things. He's not always politically correct. The things he says are not politically correct. But like he said, the world is in a situation where political correctness is sometimes not called for. So, I think his issues are very interesting. I think that he's bringing back issues that have been around for a while, but everyone kind of forgot about him and no one wanted to talk about him.
I want to get your thoughts on the issue about campaign contributions, because Trump has come out and said that he has declined several campaign contributions. He said that somebody that he knew well offered him $5 million or something to that effect, and he turned it down, saying he didn't need it. He's talked a lot about how Jeb Bush has received over $100 million in campaign contributions. Hillary Clinton has received something around $60 million in campaign contributions, and that they are essentially puppets. These politicians are puppets for their donors, and they're representing their donors if and when they win office. And I really like that he's bringing this issue to the forefront. And whether or not you agree with what Trump is suggesting, you really have to love the fact that he is not being funded by any outside donors with whom he's going to be bound to repay if in the event that he is elected. So I think that's really refreshing. The Citizens United case, he was asked about that. That's the Supreme Court case from 2010, which essentially says that corporations are people and they have free speech rights, and that money is speech. In other words, corporations can give without limit money to political action committees to spend just absolutely obscene amounts. The election in 2012 was around $1 billion per candidate, and now we've just seen the sort of corporatization of elections. He hasn't actually spoken on that. He said that he knew the person that was the CEO of Citizens United. He's in favor of campaign finance reform, but this would seem like a great opportunity for Trump to talk about campaign spending and whether Citizens United was a good ruling or not. It seems like he's tending to be against it, but I can't quite tell. What's your take on that?
I just think, Mr. Trump kind of knows the system inside and out, right? So he's been on the other side of the system in which, he was donating insane amounts of money to everybody and anyone and everyone. And the reason why he would do that is because he could call up Hillary Clinton and say, "Come to my wedding," and she got on the next plane and ran to his wedding. So I think he understands the nature of why businesses would give that kind of money to individuals, and I think we all understand that. There's nothing that's free in this world. So as much as Jeb Bush wants to say it, as much as Hillary Clinton wants to say that her belief is that it doesn't affect her decision making and it wouldn't affect it. It affects it. I mean, it would be better off for them to be honest with people and say, "Listen, these big donors that give money, yeah, it affects me. I'm going to try and not let it affect me in terms of, giving them something that would be against the people of the United States."
Well, yeah, because it's a position of public trust. I mean, there's no position in the United States that is more within what you'd call the realm of the public trust than the presidency. And so if the president is representing the interests of a very small number of donors as opposed to the American people, then it's a serious scandal. So we have to, we end up pretending that it isn't, that they're out there representing the people, and it's just these, the Koch brothers or the United States Chamber of Commerce, or whoever is coordinating these huge donations. They're just doing it out of the goodness of their heart and because they like these candidates, and that's just clearly not the case. It does not pass the smell test.
It's just not true.
Yeah,
it's simply not true, and everyone knows that, but no one wants to admit it except for Mr. Trump. So I think that's part of his allure. Part of his allure is that he is willing to tell people the truth, to tell people what is going on behind the scenes. And things that people already know, we know this is what's happening. It's just refreshing for someone to say this is what's happening. So
I think it's also, I just have to say, it's really amazing that the Koch brothers, who are considered the biggest non-governmental, biggest influence over government outside of government, has excluded Trump from the I-360 program, which it's a sophisticated voter information database that includes information about social networks, the interaction that voters may have had with advocacy groups, estimated income, recent addresses, how often people have voted, and even what type of car they drive. This is pretty sophisticated voter information that the Koch brothers have given to the other Republican candidates, but not Donald Trump. I think this is a great opportunity for Trump to really demonstrate the extent to which these candidates are tied to their donors, to say that he is the only one that's been excluded from this information.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that you'll see Mr. Trump getting more aggressive with this type of exposure as time goes by, saying, listen, it's kind of common knowledge that the old guard of the GOP does not want Mr. Trump being in the position he's in right now. I don't think anyone in the GOP likes to be held hostage, and I think that's what they feel like is going on. At the same token, I think Mr. Trump bows to no man.
Right.
That's just Mr. Trump. So I think it would help his campaign to take some contributions? Sure, but he number one is he's not a fundraiser. He doesn't want to raise funds, and people are throwing money at him right now. They want to give him money. He won't take it.
I think it would lose his appeal. I think he'd lose some of his appeal if he started taking money, because that's the big attraction to him, is that he doesn't need any. We have about a minute or two left. I just want to bring up one more topic, and that is that Trump has not yet given his position on tort reform. These are laws that would limit the ability of a plaintiff to recover in the event of an injury. This is the whole hot coffee McDonald's issue that came out about 20 years ago. I think it would be really interesting. I don't know what his position is, but Trump himself has been involved in many lawsuits. In fact, he was suing Univision for breach of contract when they dropped him from the beauty pageant. Also, he was talking about potentially suing Rosie O'Donnell a number of years back for slander. I think it would be really problematic if he were in favor of tort reform, considering how many suits he's been in. Hopefully he isn't. I think that certainly if the courthouse doors are open for a lot of the suits that he's brought, especially the one against Rosie O'Donnell, the one he was talking about bringing, then certainly the courthouse doors should be open to somebody that feels that they've been shafted by their insurance company.
Yeah, I don't know his stance on it as of yet, but it seems like from his past and from the dealings that I've had with Mr. Trump, I don't know that he would be in favor of tort reform. It'd be interesting to find out what his stance is.
We'll be watching this very closely. I want to give a very special thanks to my guest, Bradford Cohen. Real quickly, Bradford, can you give out your contact information to our listeners?
Sure, it's Brad Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, and I have a website. It's www.defend.com, and I'm available at 954-523-7774.
Thanks so much, Bradford. This is Jeff Van Treese for Talk Legal. Please tune in next Tuesday evening from 6 to 6:30. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you for listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese. Tune in next week for more insightful and exciting information about the law. You can contact Jeff by email at jvt2law@gmail.com or give him a call at 561-789-6866. That's 561-789-6866. The content of the preceding program, including all statements